All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone around the world. And welcome to Neenah Coldenhove's presentation on washability called Every Choice Counts. And today, I'm really excited. My name's Charlie Myers, and I'm the Senior Sales Representative with Neenah Coldenhove. We have an all-star speakers panel that's going to help me navigate through probably the most asked question from people at the end of the day when they're starting or already in the garment decoration business, and that's how does this wash? How does it do? So very excited to have Maradith Schwandner, and she has over 13 years of experience with Coastal Business Supplies. She is the technical success specialist. She has done a variety of different seminars, webinars, both on Facebook and YouTube. So she's a very visible person in the industry, and many of you may have met her at a trade show sometime in the past, and hopefully in the future. And then our second expert all-star is somebody that almost needs no introduction, and that's Doug DeWitt from Conde Systems. Doug has over 26 years of experience in working with color laser transfer systems, over probably 1,000 videos on Conde TV, and he may be reaching 1,000 trade shows that he's exhibited and shown products at. So Doug's a very experienced person to have on this, as well as Maradith is. So the three of us have over 56 years of experience in an industry that's barely been around 30. So we don't know all the answers. We don't pretend to, but most of the three of us have seen and heard a lot of things and done a lot of things. So we're really excited to have the opportunity to talk a little bit about this today. In this webinar, we really want you to learn how to set yourself apart by using quality fabrics, great design, and then investing in the right equipment, and then tricks and tips to not only help you, but your customers get the most out of their shirt in terms of washability. So those are the things that we're gonna learn. Helping me out are some folks over in the Netherlands at our mill in Eerbeek, the Netherlands, in the eastern part of the Netherlands. And Federica Valente is going to be our poll taker, and I'm going to turn the floor over to Federica, and she's going to read the question, and then in a few, about 45 seconds, we'll get the answer. So Federica, the floor is yours.
Welcome everyone, and I'm going to open a poll questions. I want to remind you that all the answers are anonymous, so feel free to give your truth to the question, and the question will remain open 45 seconds, and we'll start right now.
Okay, so there's the poll questions. So we'll leave that up, and we'll continue to talk, and then we'll come back to that here in a few minutes, within a minute or so. Let's talk a little bit about the heat transfer opportunity and what that means. And heat transfer, I've always said, and I think I'll talk to Doug and Maradith here in a minute, but heat transfer offers a low cost of entry, one of the lowest to get into business for yourself. A lot of freedom to do sophisticated images and get things that you couldn't get even if you had someone else do it. And then again, there's a lot of favorable attributes for heat transfer that are pleasing to the audience for sustainability. So Maradith, let's start with you. Do you agree with that? Do you think that there's a lot of opportunity for people that are just getting started in heat transfer?
Absolutely. I mean, focusing on the low cost portion of it, it's a way to kind of jump into the industry without putting out a huge investment and, just kind of get started.
Super. And Doug DeWitt from Conde Systems, any comment on that opportunity for folks?
I would definitely agree with the opportunity, Charlie, because in most instances, you're not going to really have to hunt down specialized equipment. A lot of the printers that we're going to be discussing are readily available through distribution chains such as Amazon, Walmart, and Office Depot. So very easy to get started.
Great point. Great point. Well, Federica, can we have the results of the poll?
I think people were able to see the results. What I see here, I see that great part of our participants are active and producing with heat transfer paper. from 1 to 5 years.
Okay.
80 people.
Well,
So
and that,
our
yeah,
audience.
that, and I think, Meredith, you would agree with that. A lot of people are still rather new to this, but they've come in the past couple of years.
Absolutely. We get calls every day, people just either getting started or, trying to perfect what they're already doing.
Yep. And Doug, I think you would agree too. It's sign me up and let's see what we can do, right?
Yes, especially in today's environment, given the course of the pandemic, most people are looking for stay-at-home opportunities where, they can generate income. And this is a perfect example of one of those opportunities.
Great, great. All right. Well, again, we're also here to talk about making memories last. And again, people wear shirts that are decorated for a variety of reasons. We all have our favorite t-shirts, whether they are a slogan or a saying, or they remind you of a memory or a time, or they just feel good. There's a lot of reasons why we all have our favorite t-shirts. And there's a lot of variability. And so a lot of people want to make those last. And there's a lot of things that are going to be in your control as the decorator, but then there's some that aren't, that are going to really be dependent on the person that's bought the shirt and is washing and wearing it. So how do you make the right choices? Well, the first thing is to start with some good paper. And of course, here at Neenah Coldenhove, we make some of the leading products in heat transfer papers today, both on the inkjet side and on the laser side. We have a slogan over there on the t-shirt that's called tree to tea. We control the process from tree to tea since we're a paper mill. So that ensures consistent quality. On the inkjet side, we have such products that are great, well-known, such as Jet Pro Soft Stretch, 3G Jet Opaque, Jet Opaque 2, and Jet Opaque for activewear. And of course, on the laser side, Laser One Opaque, that's been a staple in the industry for over 20 years. The first to the market with the self-weeding papers, Image Clip Laser Light, Image Clip Laser Dark, and then a really good value paper for just a single step transfer, Technoprint EZP. So every choice counts. And Federica, it's time for another poll question.
Yes. Again, you have 45 seconds and the questions are open now.
Okay. So there you
So
go.
what do you think? Yeah. What do you think most determines the longevity of a t-shirt design? Washability, application, fabric choice, or printing inks? We are curious to have your answer on that.
Yeah. And while we're waiting on people to go to the poll, let's go to something that comes up a lot. Some consider washability the most important factor in a t-shirt's longevity and its value. And some people are out there making crazy claims, and we don't do that. And I know that for both Conde Systems and Coastal Business Supplies, they don't do that either. But there's a lot of things from fabric choices to fabric softeners and everything in between, including environment, that are going to impact the ability of washability. So with that, I think we've come up to the end of the polling question. And Federica, you want to give us the results?
Sure, I think you're perfectly right, because for what I see over here, washability is the most important choice we have here.
Well, there you go. Doug, well, this time let's start with you, Doug from Conde Systems. Do you agree with that washability is probably the biggest factor?
Well, I would say as far as washability is concerned, it's the most frequently asked question when people are trying to find out about transfer paper is how well does it wash? Of course, it's a question kind of like, why is the sky blue? It sounds simple. It's really difficult to answer. But, the fact of the matter is, like any system, if you've got quality going in, you'll get quality coming out. So, make sure you're using the quality paper, make sure you got good equipment, and make sure you've got your production process down. If you take care of those things, the washability basically takes care of itself.
All right. And Meredith from Coastal Business Supplies. Any comment on the question and the answers you saw?
Well, like Doug said, I probably would have chosen E, all of the above. I think everything kind of plays into it. But yes, washability is probably one of the #1 questions that we get asked. But, like Doug said, everything kind of plays into, washability and the longevity of that shirt.
Exactly. And that's what we're really going to dive into here. So we're going to cover all those factors. A lot of times when I'm at a trade show, and I know Meredith and Doug are in the same boat, we may not have 2 to 3 to 5 minutes, or in this case a little bit longer, to really dive into this. We have to give sort of a quick canned answer, and it's really not fair to the question. So let's dive in and see where we're going. I love this slide. I love the saying, because this is really what you're trying to do as a garment decorator. You need to prepare it, the garment properly. You need to make sure that you protect it as best as possible and preserve. And there's really 5 steps to that we're going to go over. We're going to talk about design. We're going to talk about print, then press, then wear, and wash dry. So prepare, protect, and preserve your decoration to make it last as long as possible. And for the customer that bought it, for the person that bought it, make sure it's going to last as long as possible. And again, if it becomes one of their favorite shirts, they don't want it to completely fade away. Okay, so to do that, the first thing we need to talk about is fabric. And when we talk about fabric, let's start again with a poll question to keep everybody. We're trying to find out about you so we can sort of tailor our presentation on the go. So Federica, take it away with the next polling question.
Yes, and there you go. Next question. What are the 2 most important considerations when choosing a fabric for heat transfer? Cost and size, end use and cost, size and end use.
Interesting choices.
Yeah, very interesting. Interesting combination also.
Yep, very much so. So we'll come back to that there in a second, that polling question. But it really depends on what you plan to do with it. When choosing a fabric for heat transfer, there's 2 things that you really need to take into consideration. What's going to be the end use and what's the cost? Is this going to be a one-time event shirt? Is this going to be something that's going to be used for athletics? Is this something that's just a decorative shirt that, again, people are going to wear over time? And so obviously that's on the use, and then the end use, and then on the cost factor. Not all fabrics are created equal, and therefore they're going to vary in cost. So will it be worn over time or over and over? Well, Feta, let's go back to the polling question first, and then we'll get some comments from Meredith and Doug on that.
Yes, for what I see here, I see most of the people answered end use and cost.
Yeah, so there you go. So the various things that we talk about. Meredith, any comment on these 2? Are these the 2 that you would agree with?
Absolutely. I think cost is definitely #1. I mean, people want to keep their costs low, so they're making more money on it. But I mean, it's also, they should consider the higher end t-shirts or the tighter weave t-shirts that are going to produce a better result.
Yep, agree. Doug, how about you?
Yeah, I would definitely have to agree with in use and cost. You need to know how the product is going to be used. You also got to understand it's your business reputation on the line. So the advice that I would give to people is, when you're considering a fabric, it's not just the material content, but the material weight. Really, when you're talking about the difference between, let's say, like cotton and cotton poly, the few cents that you're going to pay to get that cotton poly blend will definitely pay off in the fact that you're going to get a more durable garment. So, one thing I always try to stress to people is be aware of the very inexpensive t-shirts. Those are usually not the ones you want to decorate with a transfer method.
Absolutely. And you'll notice on the bottom of some of our pages here that we also have some pro tips. And I think that this one at the bottom is really important because it talks about the smoother the fabric, the better the wash. Heavier or coarse fabrics may have a poorer wash. And this comes down to some science. So again, if you think about the transfer, which is a series of polymers, and those polymers are going to have an attractiveness to the actual fibers of the garment. If they have to go into a bunch of nooks and crannies, okay, that may seem like more surface area, but actually it's some more points for that fabric to move around and actually to start to detach a bit from the fabric itself. So going with a little bit smoother fabric that has a lower denier and has a very tight weave. Think about it. Just in general, you're going to have almost not a harder surface, but a smoother surface. So your transfer is going to last better. It's going to move better with the shirt than maybe a coarse fabric that is going to have more attachment points, but then it's going to have a poorer wash. Okay, so Doug touched on these a few minutes ago, so let's go through the three big ones. And the first that comes up is cotton. And cotton has been the source, and most of us have a lot of cotton T-shirts or have had them over the years. And if you think about it, the Cotton Council in the United States has done a great job of promoting cotton since the 1970s. But it's got a lot of resilience for a lot of reasons. Not only does it feel good, it also, you don't have to be as careful with temperature. It's more forgiving in that regard. But as Doug says, you really need to watch out for the cheap T-shirts. Maradith, talk about cotton a little bit.
Well, obviously cotton is going to be the most popular. Everybody thinks that they want cotton. I think they compare everything else to the cotton. And I think that they think that the polyester is like the old school grandma thick polyester, which it is not. But yeah, I mean, it is a little less expensive, but there are so many nice blends that are coming out and so many name brand blends that people seem to gravitate to. It's definitely something to look into.
Thank you. I totally agree. Doug, any thoughts on our plant that's grown around the world called cotton?
Well, as far as cotton is concerned, it's readily available and it's inexpensive, which is why it's so popular. In other words, we're conditioned to like cotton. I think that polyesters, while they had that negative connotation way before, nowadays is really the superior fabric. If you look at most of your sports performance clothing, they're all made out of polyester now. Polyester has really come a long way since its original invention. And realistically speaking, I think it's the fabric of the future. But fortunately, when we're talking about digital decorating, we've got a means to easily decorate any of these materials. So as far as I'm concerned, you really can't go wrong picking one of these three. It's just a matter of how you decorate it, but it can be done with digital decoration for sure.
Great points. And I think, just so we don't have to go over everything, I think we all would agree, if you have to hit a middle of the road right now, there's some wonderful blends out there that can be 50-50. They can be 60-40. They might be also have a third component in there of a little bit of spandex or lycra for some stretch and rebound. The blend shirts are just incredible. And I have some polyester shirts. The technology to weaving polyester into creating polyester fabrics has just accelerated, especially the past 10 years. I've got some, if you put them in your hands, you would say it's cotton. It feels so soft. And yeah, it's a little bit more expensive, but for most people that are doing this, I know everybody wants to watch cost, but at the end of the day, you're not doing thousands upon thousands of shirts. You're doing 1 to 15 to 20 to maybe 50. And so your cost per shirt versus the quality of the product at the end, really, it doesn't factor in as much. But I think we've talked about blends. Any thoughts on, Doug? I'll start with you this time on pure polyester. Have you seen this continue to grow?
Well, definitely polyester is growing, and basically to get around the aspect of advertising it as polyester, most manufacturers come up with clever names such as microfiber, Climalite, dry fit, things of that nature. All these different brands are basically sports performance microfiber polyester. So it's definitely growing in the market. It's just that for some reason the market hesitates to call the fabric by its true name, which is polyester. But just be aware, anytime you run across one of these different marketing names for the product, what they're referring to basically is a performance polyester.
Absolutely dead on. Meredith, any thoughts on polyester?
I totally agree with Doug on this. I think it's just a matter of retraining because so many people are going for that athletic wear or that moisture wicking and not realizing it actually is polyester. So when it's pointed out, it's like an aha moment for them.
Yeah, exactly. And I would say, I know you guys both have options for those type of products that you can offer to your customers. It's not that much different per shirt, is it? And either one of you can answer.
Well, as far
Polyester
as
to
the
cotton.
cost difference between microfiber polyester and let's say something like cotton, there is a definite cost difference, but understand there's also a definite quality difference. Whenever you are washing and drying your garments, when you empty the lint catcher, you are basically taking out cotton that used to be part of your clothing. If all of your clothing was microfiber polyester, you would never have to empty the lint catcher again because it doesn't break down. And if the material doesn't break down, it just adds to the longevity of the decorated image you have on it.
Right. And the scientist in me is going to make a comment on cotton. Remember, cotton is a cellulosic fiber, which is basically the same as the inside of a tree, which we make the paper from. That's going to be important as we talk about washability down the line. So with the other two obviously being a synthetic product or a blend of the two, 100% cotton is going to give you a little bit more challenge down the line because it is a biological product. Okay, let's talk a little bit about printing. So the second part of this is after they ask, most folks ask, well, how does it wash? Or maybe the question even before that, should I choose an inkjet printer and a laser printer? And again, this is not, there's no standard answer here. I typically will tell people, I try to find out a little bit about what they're doing and how far they're into the industry. To start out, the inkjet printer is really a good route to go because you don't have to, they're not terribly expensive. I always tell people to try to get an 11x17 or an A3 size inkjet printer so that you can do larger shirts. But, the downside, of course, you're going to run slower and you can't do wide ink. And then for the more experienced customers, again, laser printers are good. I always try to make sure that people don't buy an office laser printer. That's the cheapest thing at an office supply store online. One of the interesting things, and we know that there's the Oki brand that both these companies represent, that we have a white toner printer, so you can get white on dark. So again, it kind of depends. Actually, I also tell people you're going to end up getting both of them anyway. The more application type printer machines that you have, the more that you can do. So whichever one you start with, you're probably going to have the second one eventually. So Meredith, let's start with you. How do you answer this question when you get it?
Well, a lot of it is going to come down to budget. I mean, obviously laser is going to be a little more costly to get into. If you're just starting out, I would usually recommend, start out with the inkjet, get a cutter. I mean, you can produce some really great shirts with the papers that we have offered. If it's something you've been doing for a while, or if you just hate to weed, the laser printers are great because they're self-weeding. But yeah, it's all about getting that quality printer, on both inkjet and laser.
And Doug, you know this question well.
Well, when it comes to inkjet printing, where I think it has the advantage is in color vibrancy. So if your business model is basically photo reproduction on garments, inkjet is going to deliver outstanding quality. But what you got to be mindful of when you're shopping for an inkjet, besides a tabloid or an A3 unit, make sure it has separate ink cartridges. That is definitely going to be key to keeping your costs down. And also look for the quality of the ink. Understand that some manufacturers like HP, because they're designed to be an office printer, they're going to use a less expensive ink, so to say, is when you compare it to a unit like an Epson printer, which I think uses a great ink for this type of printing. When it comes to lasers, lasers may not deliver the vibrancy that inkjets do, but I think they make up for it in durability and the fact that you can do pre-production with laser. You can go ahead and make transfers store them, and apply them down the road. Whereas with an inkjet, it's pretty much a print and press operation.
Very good. All great points. So there's no right or wrong answer here. The answer is probably you're going to do both. Okay, Federica, we have another question that's going to lead into this.
Yes, there we go. We have a question. Which one of the three options you see over there is considered the most durable? And the poll is open now.
Okay, this is going to be interesting. And we'll talk a little bit about these. Again, two of these are inkjet. One is dyes and pigments and toner. And the quick answer I'll go across, and then we'll have our panelists talk about it after we see what the audience thinks. With dyes, they're more vibrant. They don't last as long. With pigments, they're more durable, but they're not quite as bright. With toner, again, you're putting plastic on the shirt because it's really a crushed plastic or a top of plastic. It's going to be more robust. But they all three have a little bit different look and feel to them. Most people, and I'll ask Doug and Maradith this, I tend to just send them, if they're going to do inkjet, to pigment, because unless it's a one event thing or it's really a cost issue, the pigment is going to be your best bet on that side. And of course, toner, there is some change in the toner industry. We can talk a little bit about it. But first, Federica, before I have the panelists weigh in, we should have some results of the poll.
Yeah, we have dyes and pigment at the same point. So the answers are even from pigment and dyes. Okay,
well, that's interesting. Doug, I'll let you start this one off to talk about the three different dye, pigment, and toner choices that people have.
Well, when you're looking at a dye-based inkjet, you are basically looking at what I would call an introductory printer. It's something that you can get at a very low cost. When you move into a printer that's using a pigment ink, you are probably spending more for that inkjet unit, but that's okay. Me personally, I'm a big fan of laser toner. And the reason for that is that toner doesn't expire. It's already a dry particle. The thing about inkjet printing is if you want a happy inkjet, you got to keep it printing continuously. The more you print with it, the better they are. The way I look at toner is it's a great option for what I would call the infrequent decorator. In other words, you may only get a transfer job once a week, once every other week. Like I said, it's a definite option because toner doesn't expire.
Great answer. Maradith, you get this one too, so go ahead.
Well, I think since, going back to the beginning of the presentation, since one of the biggest things with inkjet is washability and longevity of the t-shirt, we tend to lead with the pigment ink for inkjet. But again, I agree with Doug. The toner printer for me is probably my favorite. Not the mess, it lasts a long time, and the papers are just fantastic as well.
Right. You can't go wrong. But again, I think for, especially as you say, Doug, the infrequent user, if you're doing this every day, you have some better choices. But the beautiful thing about a laser printer is you can switch it off and go away, and a couple of weeks later come back and switch it on, and you're ready to go. Not saying that a inkjet printer won't be that way, but you could encounter some issues. Okay, and we're not here to bury screen printing. We really aren't. It is a complementary method, but it's a lot different than what we've been talking about in digital decoration. When people say, what about screen printing? That's great. I think, again, the biggest difference is with screen printing is, when you start to talk about hundreds of shirts at a time, it is the option, but it is a completely different art, and I would say that it is an art as much as it is a way to do something and to get it really right. So again, people, we over the years, and I think we've all three would agree with that, that we've seen customers who've started out even maybe with an inkjet printer and a hand iron end up going into screen printing. So it's definitely something that gets into the bigger volume. Maradith, any comments on that?
Well, I actually did screen printing for about 6 years. And I'll tell you what, you would make this huge run of t-shirts and then, you know, always somebody came in 2 weeks later after you blew your screens out and said, hey, I need one more, or hey, I need a smaller size. So the flexibility with doing the transfers is amazing in that, you know, it's just a click and a print and a press where you're not setting up the whole screen process. Screening is awesome, but for me, I personally think that the heat transfer industry is a lot more flexible. But again, I wasn't producing hundreds of shirts either, so it kind of worked out.
Right, right. So totally agree. It is a great option for those larger ones, but it is a more involved process. Doug, anything on screen printing?
Well, you know, what I would say in regard to screen printing is if you're going to get into screen printing, you're basically establishing a business because screen printing, you are dealing with chemicals that are going to be, you know, government regulated. You do have the cleanup involved when you're talking about screen printing. You really can't do a home-based business with screen printing and consider it environmentally safe. Whereas with transfers, you know, the inks and toners that are being used, the papers that are being used, it's a safe enough operation that you could do it in the spare room in your house. So if you're thinking about getting into screen printing, you definitely have to look up all the regulations involved with operating a screen printing business. You know, it may not be something that you would want to jump into right away.
Great points. Okay, let's talk now about application. And so we kind of gotten through the design and the printing portion. And again, here we go. This will give us a good idea, Federica, of how many shirts that our listeners and our attendees are doing. So take it away.
Exactly. And you mentioned that before. So now we are asking you if you produce less than 25, between 25 and 250, or more than 250 t-shirts per month. And there you go with the poll.
There we go. And while that poll's going, we're going to talk about one of my favorite slides here. And again, something I think that both Maradith and Doug have a lot to say on. Should I use a hand iron or a heat press? That's another question that comes out. And again, I get it. Sometimes with cost or people starting up a business with very low budget, you've got to start with a hand iron. And I know that both these companies offer hobby heat presses, and I'll let them expound on that. And then a high quality swing away or even a clamshell heat press is really the direction that you want to go. And as much as anything else, it's kind of like used to be with audio. If you wanted to have a better audio, you got better speakers. For me as a cyclist, if you want to go faster and go better, you buy better wheels. In this business, you buy a better heat press. But first, Theta, let's go back to our polling question and see how many t-shirts are people making a month? Oh, we may have lost Federica. Well, when she comes back, she can jump in. So
sorry, I was talking, but I was on mute. And
okay.
Also we had 2 more seconds to go, and I wanted to make sure that everybody would answer. And for what I can see here, our attendees produce less than 25 t-shirts per month.
And that's not unusual. So, Doug, let's start with you on this one this time. You can comment a little bit on the amount of t-shirts, but then also get into one of our favorite subjects, and that's heat press and how you apply.
Well, as far as heat presses are concerned, especially like when it comes to this slide, I would probably put a big red X over the first 2 options because I'm definitely not a fan of using a handheld iron or what I would call a clamshell model press. For application of t-shirt transfers, the best piece of equipment that you can get is what I would call a swing away commercial grade heat press. As a matter of fact, if you're looking to get into this business and you're on a limited budget, the best advice I could give you is rotate most of that budget towards your heat press and buy the biggest, baddest heat press that you could possibly afford. The reason is you're going to upgrade equipment over the course of time, your computer, your software, your printers, but a quality heat press will last 40, 50 years in your shop. So you really need to consider it a one-time investment and get the right equipment for the job.
Great point. All right, Meredith, your turn to get on this one.
I mean, you can definitely, press your shirts with the other options if that's what your budget allows. But the swing away, one of the best points I feel is you can swing away that heat platen. So when you're placing your shirt, your hands, your knuckles are away from that heat platen. So you're able to, straighten out your design and get a good visual before you actually press it. But like I said, if your budget only allows for a smaller press or a clamshell press, go for it because you got to jump in somehow.
And I'm going to bring something in within Neenah Coldenhove and within Neenah Incorporated. Every time we start a meeting, we talk about safety because we are a manufacturer. And in this case, my comment too would be your safest option is that quality heat press because it does swing away from the work area and there's a lot less chance of anybody getting burned. You still have to be careful with any of these because you are talking a very high heat. So we want everybody to really be careful and be mindful of that, using rubber gloves and other things to make sure that you're being careful when you're doing your transfers. But again, go with not only the best option but the safest option. And then Meredith, just does that surprise you that folks are making less than $25 a month that are on a call with us today?
I mean, yes, a little bit, but there's always room for growth, and that's why we're here.
Great. Doug, same with you?
Well, like Meredith said, there's room for growth, but when you're talking about an individual or, custom designed shirt, just because you're making fewer than 25 doesn't necessarily mean that you can't profit off of that number. Basically you are offering the service that screen printers really can offer, which is that single custom made garment. So you could still produce less than 25 transfers and have a healthy business.
Agreed. And we're glad you're here, number one. But number two, if you're as we saw earlier, most folks have been here 1 to 5 years. So you're here looking for options and answers. And I hope that we're giving you a lot of information today in a hopefully a short amount of time, not only about washability, but all the factors that go into this, which is really all about garment decoration. So
Hi,
again,
this is Pep. I have a question from the audience.
okay.
Can you recommend a high quality heat press?
Okay. All right. Well, again, it kind of depends on what, where you are in the world. But Meredith, I'll let you start, and then Doug, you can finish up after that.
There's so many great manufacturers out there. I think first and foremost, I would probably check out what type of warranty is offered for your heat press, because again, that's going to be where your biggest investment is, and you want to make sure that you've got that good warranty to back it up in case anything would go wrong. My personal preference obviously is going to be the Fusion, because not only does it swing away, but it also is a draw press. So you can actually just pull the drawer out without having to, if you have a smaller work area, without having to move the heat platen back and forth. And also, one thing I didn't touch on earlier is with the swing away or the draw press, you are getting consistent, even pressure for your shirts. And that is so important. Where with a clamshell, inevitably it is going to apply pressure to the back before the front, just because of the way it is designed. So definitely the swing away or the draw press is kind of the way to go as far as pressure.
Doesn't surprise me, a native Michigander refers to a Michigan product. So with stalls. So great points. Doug, another good question on what kind of quality heat press.
Well, me personally, I think there are 4 what I would consider quality heat press manufacturers out there. Insta, Hicks, Hotronics, and George Knight. Here at Conde, we only distribute George Knight heat presses. Now, as far as what I think makes a good quality heat press, it's the way the heating coils are laid out within the platen to evenly distribute heat. Of course, pressure is also an essential component, but the way that the heat is laid out over the platen makes a big difference as well. When you're talking about a quality press, George Knight guarantees their platen for the life of the press. And I know there are George Knight presses that are out there that have been operating 40, 50 years. So, you know, in my opinion, like I said, if you go with one of those 4 manufacturers, you're going to get a quality heat press.
Right. And just to follow up with that, our scientists in the laboratory have both Stahl's and George Knight presses that we design the products on. So, and we've used Hicks and Insta before also. So they're all 4 quality presses. We use them in the design of the products. These folks have them available from their companies. So I think you've got 4 good options there. And I believe those are all available globally. So again, just not for the U.S. This is an interesting slide because it talks about light designs versus dark designs, and there's a lot on here, so we're not going to go through everything here. But basically, if you have on the left-hand side, you have dark designs, and then kind of what those dark designs look like, where they look the best. Well, again, a dark design on a light fabric is going to look super. And then for light designs, the best results usually come on again a white or light off cream type of fabric. So again, fabric choices are important. If you try to put a light design on a dark shirt, it's not going to work. And you know, again, dark designs tend to do a little bit better. You can tell that some of the folks that helped us out here with the presentation, they're in the design business. So yeah, Doug, any comment on light designs versus dark in the fabric choices?
Well, you know, when you're talking about a transfer paper that's designed for a dark garment, you know, technically speaking, you can put it on any color you want. What you might have to be mindful of is material content. Sometimes with dark garment transfers, you may have a symptom that we refer to in the industry as dye migration, where if you have polyester content in your garment, under heat, those dyes bleed into your opaque material. They shift the color of the opaque material, which throws off every color that you're trying to print. So, you know, you might need to do just a little bit of testing with your fabric material to make sure you can use it with a dark garment transfer. As far as light color transfers are concerned, what I love about them is that they're inexpensive, but you really need to stick with what I would consider to be a white or an off-white garment. You know, once you get into a color scheme beyond white, you know, my advice is if there's any color in the design that's lighter than the material color you're planning on decorating, you need to go with a dark garment option.
Very good. And Meredith, talking about both fabric and design types.
Right. I mean, with the light colored, I definitely, if you're doing a photograph that might have, you know, people's faces or whatnot on there, you want to make sure that your shirt is white because it is a clear background. So like if you're using a cream color, anything that is white on your image is going to come through as that cream. So it may give it an odd look. But definitely just make sure that, you know, you're checking out your design, and always, if you're questioning it, go with the opaque paper because you're going to get a vibrant print with that, whether it is on the light or dark.
Right. And then what else can you do with opaques that you can't do with anything else? Photographs. So always remember that you've got to have that solid background, and that's why papers like Laser One Opaque are the choice for photographs. Okay.
Charlie, another question.
Okay.
What is the best transfer to use on dark tees that has a soft feel?
Well, there's a lot of choices there. Again, I think one thing that you need to think about, is it going to be the opaques that I just talked about where you've got to do some cutting out, or do you want a self-weeding paper? And a self-weeding paper is going to allow you just to transfer the toner. So again, both of them have to have a white underbelly. We probably need to have a whole webinar on this, but Meredith, I'll start with you, and just you know, what do you like and why for a really soft hand on a dark fabric?
Well, it depends on the fabric of the shirt you're using as well. So if you're using like a cotton type shirt, I would recommend the 3G opaque for the soft feel, or inkjet. If you're using something other than the cotton, I would generally recommend the jet opaque, which has got a little bit thicker feel, but you're still going to get that vibrancy. For lights, I mean, our leading paper is always going to be Jet Pro Soft Stretch.
Yep. Doug, on your side?
Well, you know, when you're talking about, using a transfer and trying to make the image softer or have a better hand or feel to it, one thing that you can be aware of is that what are known as finishing sheets or non-stick silicone sheets. If you get into this business, I'd definitely have those in your toolbox. Doing what I call a finishing press to your transfer helps to drive that emulsion into the fabric like we had mentioned earlier. It's also going to add to the durability because, you know, we're aiding in bonding that emulsion to the fiber. But a lot of these papers that we're discussing, you can make them even softer by incorporating, you know, a silicone sheet, nonstick sheet, and what I would call a finishing press into your production. Only takes about 15 to 30 seconds per shirt, but it really does make a world of difference with most transfers.
Totally agree. Again, I think we're coming up on a new topic, and as we get further down, so that's definitely one we'll put down for a future discussion because I think it warrants a lot more than we have for time for today. All right, you've all been here for washing. We built up to this. It's kind of like math. You have to learn to do certain things before you get to this point. But here we are. We're now at the washing portion of the seminar, and again, we want to see what your perceptions are. So, Feta, we have another polling question for our audience.
Yes, you're right. We are at the core of this presentation, washability, and we want to hear from you first. What are your recommendations about wash and dry to your own customer to make the purchase last longer? So the options are hot water and permanent press dry, cold water and line dry, cold water and permanent press dry, or hot water and line dry. And the poll is open now.
Okay, so there you go. So while that's going on, we'll go on to our next slide, and we'll start to talk about washing. And we have some really interesting tips here. And but the first thing I want to talk about, here comes my chemistry degree back into use. When you're doing washing, you're using water, and you're also using agitation. And I don't know how many people think of water as a solvent, but water is a solvent, and it's probably the most universal solvent in the world. It does dissolve a lot of things. Not saying it's dissolving that bond, that chemical bond between the fabric, the transfer, and the fabric, but it is a part of that. And then you add mechanical or hand agitation to that. So remember, from the very beginning, you're using a solvent and something to start to wash away. So just think about that. That's the very first thing that you do. I think our polling question is just now ending up, and so before I get into some comments here from Maradith and Doug, Feta, how's our polling look?
Yeah, very interesting. Most of the people answer cold water and line dry. And one thing I want to point out, no one answered hot water and permanent dry press. So how do we comment to that?
Okay. Well, very good. So again, I think that makes our job a little easier because everybody's already started on that in that first part. I'm going to go through these and then let Doug and Meredith talk about washing. One of the most important things you can do, and it goes back to something I said earlier about cotton being a cellulosic fiber, a biological fiber. But no matter what, once you've created your transfer, you need to let that sit and cure for 24 hours. To let, if it's a cotton product, to let the cotton fibers get back to closer to the normal state. And also to give these chemical bonds a time to really cure and become more of a permanent attachment. So, and I think we'll both talk about, we've seen it before where somebody's had a rush job, and it's especially for something like maybe an athletic event or a run, and people they'll press them and they'll use them before 24 hours, and you'll get bleeding. So that's a possibility, as well as you don't have that transfer completely bonded to there. Don't dry clean. We talked about solvents, even worse solvents in dry cleaning. That's just a no-no. Can't do it. The best is obviously to hand wash your machine garments and make sure that you wash your garments inside out. Again, protect that design that you've spent so much time on, from the direct contact of the agitation of a washing machine or even your hands. Choose cold water settings. That's really important. and use mild detergents. My wife and I are pretty active folks, and there are things like sports suds and things like that that we use in our daily clothing that get the stink out, but they're not as harsh. And we also have internationals here, and you know, again, Neenah Coldenhove, our digital transfer paper division is based in the Netherlands, and European washing is different than American washing. They use hotter water and less drying energy because energy is more costly. But then we also need to talk back about chemistry, that hard water, in other words, water with a lot of minerals, can also can be more damaging to materials and the designs themselves. So if you have hard water, you may want to consider, or have your customers consider, getting a water softener. So there's a lot here. I think this time we'll go back and have Maradith start. Let's talk about this slide and you know, what you heard from what our audience is, and what your comments are here when it comes to washing.
I think the most important one is liquid fabric softener. We have found that liquid fabric softener, it will destroy that adhesive, whether you're doing heat transfer paper, vinyl, DTG, anything. It just does not work well with decorated garments. So we generally recommend, you know, no liquid fabric softener. Dryer sheets seem to be fine, but again, line drying is better. And then of course, always wash it inside out.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. So Doug, you've also spent a lot of times in front of a washing machine, and had customers that have done the same. Any comments on this slide?
Well, you know, the comment that I would make, besides, you know, waiting 24 hours for your shirt to cure, which I think is an excellent tip, is to understand that water quality does make a tremendous difference. Not to make, you know, light of a situation, but if you live in a community like Flint, Michigan, you may not have your designs last more than a dozen washes and dries because of the, you know, leads and other things that are in their water supply. Water quality does make a huge difference. As far as detergents are concerned, I really haven't noticed a difference between, let's say, like powdered detergents and liquid detergents. But nowadays with detergents, especially the pod varieties, you know, sometimes they might include a liquid fabric softener. If that's the case, you don't want to use it. You know, last piece of advice I'd give to the audience is, if you do have a bottle of liquid fabric softener next to your washer and dryer, take it and throw it in the trash can. It is practically the devil.
Totally agree. And going back to detergents that are for, you know, a lot of people think that that detergents will not work as well in cold water. There's a whole new set of cold water detergents coming out. There's a commercial here in the United States with, I think, Tide, which is the leading detergent, and they have Ice-T and Stone Cold Steve Austin talking about, you know, these two tough guys talking about using cold water and cold water detergents. So there are better options out there. So keep the heat away and try to really keep that agitation down to a minimum. Get the garment clean, but don't overdo it. So that's washing. And again, I think the one that everybody sometimes forgets is, you know, and again, as a decorator, you can't always, sometimes you got to get it rushed out the door, but when you can, have at least 24 hours before you deliver the product to your customer. All right, drying. Okay, again, chemistry guy coming back in. Remember that heat is, in chemistry terms, is a high heat source or a high energy source going to a low energy source, and the result in between is heat. And heat, after you've already used a solvent in washing with water and agitation and a detergent, now you're going to take this and put it into a heat source with agitation. Which again is no friend to a polymer coating that is attached to a garment. So we recommend that, you know, drip line or line dry is best. It really is. Even, you know, if you have to put it in the dryer for just a minute or two to maybe knock the wrinkles down, and especially if you're using a polyester or a blend garment, it's not going to wrinkle so bad. Make sure if you do have to dry the garments are inside out. Really make it low tumble. And as Maradith says, do not use fabric softener. I think she's going to come up and talk about dryer sheets, which is a little bit differently. And then, of course, if you do have to iron it, do not directly iron on that heat transfer design. So the less heat you can get into this equation and agitation, the better. So this time, Doug, I'm going to have you you talk a little bit about drying, and Meredith, you can follow up after that.
Well, in regards to drying, the advice that I always try to give our clients is, despite what manufacturers might tell you as far as the washability of a garment, you should always conduct your own wash testing, because as we mentioned before, water quality does play an important factor. For instance, here at Conde, our benchmark test for a transfer paper is, will it survive 25 hot washes, hot dries on 100% cotton? Because if you could put it through that type of abuse and you still have a good image quality after 25 hot washes and hot dries, that's probably going to be as durable as you're going to get. So while we recommend to people that they need to take care in washing and drying their garments from a supplier standpoint, when it comes to testing, we definitely want to abuse when we are testing, because you got to push it to the limit, so to speak. So the advice that I would give everyone attending the webinar today is, perform your own wash testing, and when it comes to dry testing, go ahead and get the dryer as hot as you can, because if your transfer will survive that, once you put it in the hands of your client, you should be good to go.
Yeah, and that's something different. Agree. We do the same at the mill. We do. Our scientists take it in an extreme direction. Another point before Meredith, you start and give your comments, is after washing and drying, give that shirt 24 hours before you wash it again, if possible. Because again, if it's got cotton in it, or even so, give the fabric and the transfer time to relax again, because they tend to, especially those cellulosic fibers of cotton, tend to draw up or go the other way or expand out, depending on where you are in the wash and dry cycle. And so give that garment a time, some more time before you do that. May not be possible if this is a shirt you wear, for work, and you may only have a couple of them, or you got a 3-day event and you got one shirt, but try to give that shirt as much time in between the cycles. Meredith, talk about drying.
Well, if you do have to put it in the dryer, I would recommend just taking it out while it's still damp and then laying it out so you can kind of flatten it out to get those wrinkles out. If you do have any wrinkles, however, you can iron your shirt. Just do not make contact with that iron and that heat transfer, because it'll end up being a mess for you. I mean, feel free to iron your shirt. If you have to iron the back and your images on the front, thread your shirt over your ironing board. But I mean, you can iron your shirt, just don't iron your transfer.
Yeah. And also too, you want to talk about dryer sheets?
Sure. Dryer sheets does not have the same impact as the fabric softener. So you feel free to use the dryer sheets, but again, just do it on a low setting and pull it out while it's still damp. But we have not found in our testing that dryer sheets has any impact on the actual transfer.
Good to know. One thing in the modern world, if you're a decorator, you may want to consider getting a QR code generator, and when you give your garments out, either put a sticker or a tag on there with a QR code generator back to your website, and put some of these washing tips there, because I think everybody today, when they see a QR code, automatically goes to that. And you may not save every shirt and for every customer, but you may actually save somebody if they go, oh yeah, I really should do this, or I should do that, or they'll contact you guys directly. So use the latest and greatest ability to communicate with your customers with QR code generators, and take them back to your website. And again, that puts them back to you, but you can get more information to them even in the laundry, because let's face it, most people have their phones on them when they're doing laundry. Okay. So those are the two big things that we see. But I think what we also want to get across is, no matter what your method of transfer is, that it's going to fade. And it doesn't matter. Everything's going to fade, and eventually it can also crack and peel away. So it usually doesn't happen, but we're definitely going to get fading. And we wanted you to see this for yourself. This is a computer generation, but this is on a light transfer. You know, and again, after 8 washes, the transfer is still there, but it's just not quite as vibrant because, again, all the things we talked about, water being a solvent, you know, agitation, heat, and drying, and just the you know, the mechanical and the physical changes to the transfer to the cotton itself is or the polyester, as well as the wearing of the shirt. So, you know, Maradith, want to talk a little bit about what you see there and what you would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it is going to fade over time. We generally don't see much cracking or whatnot at this point, but it will fade over time. But I mean, who doesn't like a good vintage looking shirt?
Perfect answer. Doug, on light shirt?
Well, you had mentioned as far as cracking is concerned, you know, I had mentioned earlier about using a very lightweight cotton garment. Sometimes these lightweight cottons will have like a chemical enhancer, so to speak, that keeps them from dramatically shrinking. Those are going to have an effect on how well that emulsion bonds to the fabric. If you ever have a situation where you wash your garment one time and it severely cracks, it almost looks like a spider web or safety glass cracking, you might have a chemical in your cotton garment, and I would highly suggest at that point you shop around for a different t-shirt.
Yep, totally agree. Okay, let's go to dark. Same thing. If you look on the left, you're going to see a very bright, vibrant image after 8 washes. And this is an opaque type or a self-weeding type transfer. But again, the same thing is there. And Doug, I'll let you go first this time, and then we'll go to Maradith.
Well, generally speaking, you know, from the testing that we have done here, an opaque material should hold its color a little better than, let's say, like a transfer designed for white or lights, because you have that natural built-in white background. So, you know, again, if you're using a quality printer, using a quality ink or quality toner, if you're doing designs for dark garments with opaque materials, you should see better color retention in those transfers than you would, let's say, like a transfer for a white or light color.
Great. Maradith, on the dark.
I agree with Doug. But I do want to say 8 washes doesn't sound like a lot of washes, but generally people are not going to wear this shirt every single day. So you're looking at least a few months before you notice any visible fading of the shirt. I mean, even if you're wearing it once a week, and most people don't even do that, I mean, that's 8 weeks. I mean, that's a long time.
It is. Very, very good point. And that's the truth. Again, you know, and you want your customers to come back at some point. So it's like, hey, you did a nice job on that shirt. It made a memory for me. It's got an emotional appeal. Or from a business perspective, I needed that shirt. So, you know, again, you want people coming back. And I don't think as Doug said, if you've got a problem right out of the on the first wash, then probably it was something back in your application. And we all can help you with that and try to troubleshoot what that problem was. And if you do mess up shirts, remember, in your transfer process, always put those over to the side, and you can use those to test and use, you know, because you're going to have designs sometimes, or, you know, maybe you're going to change an ink or a toner or a printer or whatever, and you might need some test fabric. So just because you screw up, that there's still some good fabric that can be used there. So again, you can follow all 3 of us, all 3 of our companies on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. You know, with Neenah Coldenhove, with Conde Systems, with Coastal Business Supplies. Lots of good info, and we try to keep these updated with the latest information. So again, we're constantly trying to push out more and more information to you guys, and help you become better garment decorators. Okay, Feta, we're coming to the end here, and before we get to open up for questions, one last polling question.
This is not a question we're gonna share the result. Don't worry, this is just for our feedback. Yeah, as Charlie said, you can follow us on our platform, digital platform, social media, and website. And I want to ensure to everybody who participated that we will send a link with a recorded video, so you can always go back and watch what we discussed today, and eventually send us some question if you want to go deep into a specific topic. But for now, we would like to ask you if you found this webinar interesting for you, with valuable enough points to put into action. So the poll is open now, and I'm very curious to have your feedback.
Yes, we are. Always helpful. And while we're doing that, now we're going to open up the floor for any questions. We've had some good ones, and if you have something that's going to take a little bit longer, we'll try to get your information and come back to you after the webinar. But you can put into chat if there's any questions at this point.
Now we need some music again, but don't be shy.
Exactly. And if we don't, you can always email any of us and ask questions, and get a more detailed answer if not in between. So I saw somebody said, are samples available? Absolutely. Depending on what country you're in, because this is a global webinar, you can either contact us at Neenah Coldenhove, or in the U.S. you can contact Coastal Business Supplies, or also for samples.
Charlie, another question. Is the self-weeding transfer the same as the print and cut?
Ooh, good question. Well, let's start. Maradith, what's your answer to that?
Well, because you can control the toner on the self-weeding ones, I would say you probably have a little bit better washability. With some papers, there are transfer rips available, which controls the amount of toner you're putting down or the amount of white backing you're putting down, which also controls it. Or you can rasterize the image, which allows better flow through with the water. So, I mean, those are all different considerations to look into, and a lot depends on the paper that you're using as well.
Very good. Doug, what about print and cut versus, again, is this the same? The question was, is self-weeding transfer the same as print and cut? So any answer you can give there?
Well, the whole purpose of using a self-weeding paper is so that you don't have to use a plot or vinyl cutter or pick tool. Basically, the process is doing the weeding for you. The trick to most self-weeding papers is you have to have enough ink or toner concentration to have the emulsion apply and then eventually release to the garment, which is why you've seen basically these white toner print systems taken over the market, because even though we might be dealing with a very light or very fine color, we can add white to that mix to create enough what I would call toner gravity for the self-weeding process to work. So basically, if you go with a white toner system and you go with a good quality self-weeding transfer paper, you're going to get output quality that I think rivals direct-to-garment or screen printing.
Great answer. And again, I think Evelyn asked another question, is which paper is considered self-weeding? Is that with white toner printer? It doesn't have to be for lights, but for darks to be self-weeding, and you don't have to have it there either. But you're only going to be able to do colors. White is where most people want to go, and you just don't have that ability on a desktop inkjet. I see another question from one of my colleagues, Gijsbert Harmsman, who's our Mr. Dye Sub himself. And the first one we'll come back and get but why not use a softener? Let me give the chemistry answer first. Number one, it's considered, Gijsbert, a lubricant in a way. So it's designed to get in between the fibers themselves and give a little bit of a lubricant. So it can work its way into that chemical bond between the transfer and the fiber itself. So again, it's designed to get in there and be slick, and that can cause issues with that. And Maradith and Doug, any other why not use a softener? I think you guys have given that, but it's basically makes the transfer fall off.
Well, I would say, in regard to liquid fabric softener, not only is it going to have a detrimental effect on cotton, but it also has a detrimental effect on polyester as well. Basically, the whole point of the softener, the way it makes your clothes softer, is by basically breaking down the fiber prematurely. you spend good money on your clothing. Who wants to do that? So, that's why I say if you have a bottle of liquid fabric softener, in your laundry room, take it and throw it in the trash can and do yourself a world of good.
Meredith, anything to add?
I think you pretty much covered it with that.
Yeah, just go away from it. It's not a good thing. And his first question is, the high amount of water for the production of cotton have a negative influence on the cotton market? Well, it should, but unfortunately, in a lot of the areas where cotton is grown, mainly in Asia, in China, they still have a lot of production there, and they want to, and there's still such a demand for cotton. I think again, as people begin to realize that cotton is a tremendous drain on soil and resources, that may start to change that. But boy, we've got 50 plus years of the Cotton Council in the U.S. saying how wonderful and soft cotton is. Meredith, you want to add anything on that?
I don't know actually what I could add to that. I think you've pretty much covered it.
Okay, Doug, anything there?
Well, the one thing that I would throw in is, with these microfiber polyesters, the more and more manufacturers that get into the game, ultimately it's going to drive down the cost of the material. When companies like Nike, Reebok, Under Armour, when they, are using this material and they're promoting it worldwide, I think over the course of time, you will eventually see microfiber polyester take over.
Good point. And again, I think that's going to be correct. Last thing for Heisbert on that, there was a cotton drought back in 2006, 2007, where most of the Chinese cotton fields were just decimated. And we saw a tremendous rise in cotton prices at that point and availability. And the mature cotton plants, they had to start over. And for a while there, T-shirts didn't feel as good, which was just a part of our world. So I think that it's a very involved question, but I think Doug's right. Things are moving towards performance fabrics. Okay, I think
we have a lot of questions here, to be honest. I have many questions, and I think we're not going to be able to cover them all. So maybe it's a good idea to wrap up, and then we will answer those questions separately. What do you think?
That'd be great.
Here in the Netherlands, people have dinner at this time, so.
Absolutely. I want to thank everyone that took the time to join us today. I hope this was helpful. You learned something, or at least you're able to put all these things together as you're working on washability for your designs. And of course, I really want to thank Meredith and Doug. Your companies, you people are great. You're great resources. You're fun to work with, and you're just a wealth of knowledge. And we couldn't do it without you. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Same, and thanks for producing a quality product.